Leonardo DiCaprio stood in line at McDonald's, unnoticed by anyone, just another face in the crowd. But then he saw him, a man in a dark hoodie, motionless, too still. Leo had spent decades studying people, learning to understand the weight of a gaze, the meaning of hesitation, and something about this man made him wince. Then the child spoke. "Mommy, can I have ice cream?" And the man moved. It was a quiet evening in Los Angeles, the golden glow of the setting sun reflecting off the glass windows of a McDonald's at the corner of a busy street. Inside, the scent of fresh fries and warm burgers filled the air, mixing with the chatter of families and late-night customers. Leonardo DiCaprio, dressed in a casual hoodie and baseball cap, stood in line, blending in with the crowd. He had just finished a long day on set and craved something simple, something normal. As he glanced at the menu, a small voice behind him caught his attention. "Mommy, can I have ice cream, please?" Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video so you don't miss tomorrow's video. A young boy, no older than 6, clung to his mother's hand, his big eyes filled with excitement. His mother, a tired but gentle-looking woman, smiled and nodded. "Okay, sweetie, but only if you finish your dinner first." Leonardo smiled slightly at the innocent exchange, but something else caught his attention. A man, standing just a few feet away, was watching them too. Unlike the other customers, this man wasn't looking at the menu. His eyes were fixated on the mother and her child. Something about the way he stood too still, too patient, sent a chill through Leonardo's spine. His instincts kicked in. He had seen enough crime thrillers and real-life encounters to recognize when something was off. The man wasn't just any customer. He was waiting. Leonardo took a step to the side, casually adjusting his position so he could get a better look at the man. He was tall, dressed in a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up just enough to obscure most of his face. His hands were tucked into his pockets, and he wasn't in line. He was just standing there, watching. The mother, oblivious to the man's presence, led her son toward a booth near the back of the restaurant. The stranger shifted slightly, turning his body in their direction. Leonardo's stomach tightened. This wasn't a coincidence. As an actor, he had spent years perfecting the art of observation, studying people, their body language, their habits. This man wasn't acting like a father, a relative, or even a friendly stranger. He was a predator. Leo didn't know what the man's plan was, but he wasn't going to wait to find out. His order number was called, but he ignored it. Instead, he grabbed a tray at the self-service station, pretending to fix himself a drink while keeping the man in his peripheral vision. Then, the stranger moved. Slowly, carefully, he began to walk toward the mother and child. The mother sat her son down and handed him his happy meal, smiling as she unwrapped her own burger. She had no idea that danger was closing in. The man moved with eerie patience, keeping his distance but never losing sight of them. His gaze flickered to the door, then back to the child. Leo knew that look. It was the look of someone calculating their next move. Leo casually picked up a handful of napkins and took a step toward the mother's table, making it seem like he was just another customer looking for a seat. As he walked, he caught the mother's eye and gave her a polite nod, as if to say, "Everything okay?" She smiled back, unaware of the shadow creeping closer behind her. Leo's muscles tensed. Then, the man reached into his pocket. That was it. That was the moment. Leonardo DiCaprio acted on instinct. He turned sharply, stepping into the stranger's path, blocking him from getting any closer to the mother and child. The move was smooth, casual, but deliberate. "Hey, man," Leo said, keeping his voice light but firm. "You got the time?" The man stopped, his face partially hidden under the hood. His body language shifted, hesitation, maybe even annoyance. He hadn't expected to be noticed. And that's when Leo saw it. A glint of something small, metallic. The man hesitated, his fingers twitching in his pocket. Leonardo's pulse quickened, but he didn't back down. Instead, he held the stranger's gaze, keeping his expression relaxed, almost casual, like they were just two guys having a normal conversation in a McDonald's. But this was anything but normal. "Sorry, man," the stranger muttered, shifting slightly as if debating whether to move around Leo or back off. His voice was low, scratchy, like someone who didn't want to be remembered. Leo glanced past him. The mother was still distracted, unwrapping ketchup packets for her son. She had no idea how close she was to real danger. He had to keep it that way. Leo smiled, nodding like he wasn't aware of the tension crackling between them. "No worries." Then he shifted ever so slightly, his body still blocking the path between the man and the table. He had seen this scene play out before, in real life, in the tabloids, in the stories of women and children who weren't so lucky. Not tonight. The man exhaled sharply, realizing Leo wasn't going to move. He took half a step back, glancing toward the exit. "Mommy, can I go get ice cream now?" The boy's voice was innocent, unaware. But to the man in the hoodie, it was a signal. A moment of opportunity. The moment the man lunged, Leonardo reacted. His body moved before his mind could catch up, years of action scenes, fight choreography, and survival instincts kicking in all at once. Leo stepped directly into the man's path, his arm shooting out. He didn't punch, didn't shove, he just blocked, creating a barrier between the stranger and the boy. "Whoa, easy there," Leo said, keeping his voice steady, controlled. But his eyes burned with warning. The man stumbled back, clearly not expecting resistance. His hand twitched inside his pocket. Was it a weapon? A knife? Leo wasn't going to wait to find out. The mother finally noticed. Her head snapped up, eyes widening as she saw the man just a few feet away from her son. "Hey," she gasped, instinctively pulling her child closer. The tension in the restaurant shifted instantly. A few customers turned, sensing that something was wrong. A father at a nearby table straightened, his hand tightening around his soda cup. The man's breathing was heavy now. His plan had fallen apart. He hadn't expected interference, especially not from Leonardo DiCaprio. He looked at Leo again, this time with something new in his eyes. Recognition. He knew who Leo was. And now, Leo knew he knew. Which meant things could either de-escalate or get a whole lot worse. Leo took a slow breath. He had to end this now. His hand went to his pocket where his phone was. "Whatever you're thinking about doing," Leo said, his voice calm but edged with steel, "I think again." Then, without breaking eye contact, he pulled out his phone and pressed 911. The moment Leonardo pressed 911, the man's entire body tensed. Leo kept the phone in clear view, making sure the stranger saw it. He didn't say a word, just let the screen speak for itself. Dialing. The stranger's eyes darted around the restaurant. People were watching now. A few parents had pulled their kids closer. The employees behind the counter had gone quiet, exchanging nervous glances. Leo knew exactly what was happening inside the man's head. He was cornered, and cornered men were dangerous. The mother clutched her son tightly, her eyes flicking between Leo and the stranger. She looked terrified. Leo had to keep things from escalating. "Look, man," Leo said, keeping his tone even. "You don't want to do this." The stranger's jaw clenched. His breathing was heavy, erratic. His fingers twitched again inside his pocket. Leo tightened his grip on the phone. Then, the 911 operator picked up. "911, what's your emergency?" The moment the voice came through the speaker, the stranger panicked. He spun on his heel and bolted for the exit. Leo didn't hesitate. Male suspect, black hoodie, leaving McDonald's on Sunset and Vine, possible abduction attempt. He shouted into the phone as he took off after him. The restaurant erupted into chaos. A few customers gasped, while an employee rushed to the mother's side. Leo burst out the door, his heart pounding. The man was fast, slipping through the crowded sidewalk, shoving past pedestrians. He wasn't about to let the bad guy get away. Leonardo sprinted after the man, weaving through the crowd outside the McDonald's. The night air was thick with the scent of car exhaust and city life, but Leo only focused on one thing, the dark hoodie vanishing into the chaos ahead. "Stop that guy," Leo shouted, pointing as he ran. A few people turned, startled, but no one reacted fast enough. The man shoved past a group of tourists, nearly knocking an older man off balance. Leo dodged around them, his heart hammering. He wasn't an action hero in a movie right now, he was just a guy chasing a real criminal. And this guy was fast. The man darted down a narrow alley, barely lit by a flickering street lamp. Leo hesitated for half a second before plunging in after him. The alley was tight, lined with dumpsters and stacked crates. The stench of rotting food filled the air. At the end of the alley, a chain-link fence stood tall. The guy didn't slow down. Instead, he jumped, grabbing the fence and scrambling up. Leo skidded to a stop, watching him go. He could climb it too, but the guy had a head start. Then sirens. From the street behind them, red and blue lights flickered against the walls. The guy hesitated, looking back. Big mistake. Leo launched forward, grabbing the bottom of the fence just as the man was halfway up. He shook it hard. The guy lost his grip and fell back onto the pavement with a loud thud. Leo pounced. Before the man could scramble away, Leo grabbed his arm, pinning him down. "Not so fast, buddy," he panted. A second later, tires screeched. A police cruiser slammed to a stop at the alley's entrance. Two officers leaped out, guns drawn. Leo raised his hands and nodded toward the guy beneath him. I think this is who you're looking for. The flashing red and blue lights bathed the alley in an eerie glow as two officers stormed toward them, guns drawn. Hands where we can see them, one of them shouted. Leo immediately lifted his hands, stepping back from the suspect, who was groaning on the pavement. He was following a woman and her kid. I think he was planning to take the child. The words felt heavy in the air. One officer kept his gun trained on the suspect while the other moved in, grabbing the man's wrists and snapping handcuffs onto him. What's your name? The officer demanded. The man didn't answer. His hood had fallen back during the scuffle, revealing a pale, gaunt face with sunken eyes. He looked younger than Leo had expected, late 20s, maybe early 30s, but there was something cold in his expression. Something wrong. The mother's voice suddenly echoed in Leo's mind. Mommy, can I get ice cream now? Leo's jaw clenched. This guy had been waiting for the perfect moment. If Leo hadn't noticed, if he had just walked out with his food like a normal customer. His stomach turned at the thought. The second officer patted the suspect down, then suddenly stiffened. He pulled something out of the man's pocket. Leo's blood ran cold. A folding knife. A small but deadly switchblade. Leo swallowed hard. If this guy had made it outside with that kid. The mother and son had no idea how close they had come to a nightmare. Jesus, the officer muttered, staring at the blade before slipping it into an evidence bag. You saved that family from something real bad, Mr. DiCaprio. Leo barely heard him. He was still staring at the suspect, who had finally lifted his head. And he was smiling. Not a normal smile. Not nervous, not regretful. A knowing smile. Like he didn't care that he'd been caught. Like he was already planning something else. A chill ran through Leo's spine. He had acted on instinct tonight, but the reality of what almost happened was settling in. This wasn't a random creep. This was someone who had done this before, and someone who would do it again if given the chance. The officer yanked the suspect up to his feet, pushing him toward the police car. Let's go. You can explain yourself downtown. But the man never took his eyes off Leo, and just before the officers shoved him into the squad car, he spoke. Softly, just loud enough for Leo to hear. This isn't over. Leo's heart pounded. Leo stood frozen in the alley, the man's chilling words echoing in his mind. This isn't over. The police cruiser's red and blue lights flashed against the brick walls as the officers slammed the car door shut, locking the suspect inside. But even through the darkened window, Leo could still feel the man's stare. A detective arrived a few minutes later, stepping out of an unmarked sedan. He was tall, mid-40s, dressed in a wrinkled blazer with a badge clipped to his belt. His sharp eyes scanned the scene before landing on Leo. Mr. DiCaprio? The detective asked, walking up and offering a firm handshake. Detective James Carter, LAPD. Leo nodded, still rattled. This guy was stalking a mother and her kid inside the McDonald's. He was waiting for the right moment. Carter took out a notepad. You're sure he was after the child? Leo exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. He wasn't looking at the mother. He wasn't looking at anyone else. Just the kid. The detective jotted something down, his expression unreadable. You've got good instincts. But here's where it gets interesting. He nodded toward the patrol car. That man? His name is Daniel Rourke, and he's been on our radar for months. Leo stiffened. Months? Carter nodded grimly. He's suspected of being part of a child trafficking ring operating in LA. We just never had enough to pin him down. But tonight? He tapped his notepad. You just gave us what we needed. Leo's stomach twisted. This wasn't just some creep following a mother. This was organized. Planned. Deliberate. How big is this? Leo asked, his voice low. Carter glanced around before answering. Bigger than you want to know. The weight of those words settled heavily on Leo. For years, he had dedicated his life to fighting for the environment, for climate change, for the future of the planet. But now, standing in this dark alley, he realized there were other fights that needed warriors too. And this one? It was happening right in front of him. Carter tucked his notepad away. Look, I don't want to keep you here all night, but we could use your help. Leo frowned. My help? Carter hesitated, then pulled out his phone. We've been tracking Rourke for weeks. We suspected he was connected to something bigger, but we had no idea who he was working for. Until he turned his phone screen toward Leo. Leo froze. On the screen was a security camera still from earlier that night. A grainy image of Daniel Rourke, shaking hands with someone in a suit. Someone Leo recognized. Someone powerful. Leo's jaw tightened. You've got to be kidding me. Carter nodded. Looks like the guy running this operation is none other than. Leo finished the sentence for him. Someone I've met before. A chill ran through Leo. This wasn't just about saving one kid. This was about taking down a monster. Leo's eyes stayed locked on the blurry image on Carter's phone. Even through the grainy resolution, he knew who that man was. He had shaken hands with him at charity galas, sat next to him at fundraisers, had casual conversations about making the world a better place. And now, he was looking at the real man behind the mask. Leo clenched his fists. Tell me that's not who I think it is. Carter exhaled. It is. Richard Langley. Leo's stomach tightened. Richard Langley was a billionaire philanthropist well known in Hollywood circles. A smooth talker, always smiling for the cameras. He funded conservation efforts, had ties to politicians, and claimed to care about the future of humanity. But now he was on a security camera, shaking hands with a child trafficker. Leo's pulse pounded in his ears. I've been in the same room as this guy a dozen times. He's got people fooled, big names, powerful people. They think he's one of the good guys. Carter nodded grimly. That's what makes him so dangerous. Leo shook his head, trying to process it. You're telling me this guy, who donates millions to humanitarian causes, is actually behind a human trafficking ring? Carter's face was stone cold. We don't have the full picture yet, but we do know Langley's money is showing up in places it shouldn't. Offshore accounts, shell companies. And now, we have this. He tapped the image. A direct link between Langley and Rourke. Leo felt his hands shaking. This guy sits next to world leaders. He gives speeches about protecting the future. And the whole time, he's been selling children into nightmares. Carter finished. Leo had been angry before. He had fought against climate destruction, greed, and corruption. But this was different. This was pure evil. What happens next? Leo asked, his voice tight. Carter's eyes flickered toward the patrol car, where Rourke sat in the backseat, silent but still smirking. We put pressure on Rourke. He won't talk easy, but now that he's caught, Langley might try to cover his tracks. Leo's jaw tightened. And if he does? Carter's eyes darkened. Then people start disappearing. A heavy silence hung between them. Leo knew what that meant. Rourke might vanish before he ever testified. The evidence might go missing. And worst of all, more kids could be taken. Detective Carter studied Leo for a long moment, the weight of the situation heavy between them. The red and blue lights of the squad car flashed across Leo's face, highlighting the fire in his eyes. You want in? Carter repeated, his voice low. This isn't a movie, DiCaprio. There's no script, no stunt doubles. This guy? Langley? He's got money, power, and people willing to bury this whole thing if it ever sees the light of day. Leo's jaw tightened. That's exactly why I won't look the other way. Carter sighed, rubbing his temple. You're famous. That means you're a liability and an asset at the same time. If Langley finds out you know, he'll either try to buy you off or make you disappear. Leo crossed his arms. I don't scare easy. Carter smirked slightly. Good. Because we're gonna need someone who can get close to him. Leo frowned. What are you saying? Carter lowered his voice. Langley knows me. Knows the department's been sniffing around. But you? You're a friend. You've been in the same rooms, shaken his hand, smiled for the same cameras. If you keep playing that role, I can get him to slip up, Leo finished. Carter nodded. We'll wire you up. You meet with him. Keep it casual. See if he lets something slip. And if he does, we've got him. Leo exhaled slowly. It was dangerous. Reckless. But if there was even a chance he could help take Langley down, he had to do it. I'm in. Carter's face remained unreadable for a moment, then he extended his hand. Then let's get to work. Leo shook his hand, sealing the deal. This wasn't just about one night in a McDonald's. This was bigger, darker. And Leonardo DiCaprio? He was about to step into the fight of his life. Because some people use their power for greed. And others? They use it to take down monsters.